Oh, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another of our bicentenary lectures. My unhappy duty is to point out the fire escape routes, which are on the left there, the open door, and on the right, the maze door, and we will explain, if necessary, goodness if we're not, how to get out and start with direction. 200 years, we've had a number of fascinating lectures, and we still have, I think, 2 more to go after this one. So it's been a terrific year, and I'm delighted to welcome this time Peter Sjöstedt. I'll leave him to explain the H. He's exhausted, he's just had half an hour of fighting with electronics, but we did manage to get there with 5 minutes to spare, and so he's had 5 minutes to take his breath. So, welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Well, thanks for coming here. I'm surprised so many people turned up, really, because usually people tell me to shut up about this. So, thanks for coming. When I offered to give this talk, I didn't really think it through, because philosophy of mind really is such a vast subject that to give an introduction to it in an hour or less is quite a task. So what I'd like to do is just go through the basics, as it were, and then I'd much prefer a big Q&A session afterwards. So if you have any questions, please note them down, and we can speak about it later. Also, I mean, when I'm talking as well, if I say something that you don't understand, do raise a hand, and I might choose to take the question if appropriate, but I might not, so then keep it up to after. It's all set up actually, ready, so take a seat. Right, so, the philosophy of mind. I should say a little bit about myself and about the H here. So, I'm Swedish English, Sjöstedt is Swedish, and H is short for Hughes, and I had to shorten the name for the book, which is here for sale, by the way, at the end. But it caused so many problems, but now it's too late because on the book title anyway, it's a big mess. But anyway, that's my name, Peter Sjöstedt-H. I'm based at Exeter University, almost finished my PhD in a topic within the philosophy of mind. And I've done a lot of that PhD here in this very library. So I'm delighted to be part of the bicentenary celebrations. But anyway, let's get on with it then. So, the philosophy of mind. What is the philosophy of mind? It really concerns 2 questions. What is mind, and how does mind relate to matter? Really, a 3rd question is, what is matter? As well, as we shall see, that's a very important part of it. Philosophy of mind, I mean, people say it sort of started with Descartes, René Descartes in the 17th century, but it became very similar to psychology until the 20th century. But psychology, with Freud especially, went more into therapy, medicine. It's related to neurology, neuroscience, but it's more concerned with logic than biology. It's also related to physics, as we shall see, in relation to matter. So it's somewhere in between all of those subjects, but its real task, I think, is to answer the biggest mystery that we humans face, which is what is the mind, what is consciousness, what is sentience. What is the mind? Well, there's no simple answer to that. I prefer to call the mind sentience, which is a sort of umbrella term which encapsulates everything. This is just a sort of framework, but when we talk about mind, I mean, we can divide it into different parts. There is the traditional 5 senses, you know, vision, bodily senses such as touch, auditory, olfactory, smell, gustatory senses, 5 traditional senses that Plato spoke about 2,500 years ago. There are perhaps more senses than that. Alfred North Whitehead, a great British philosopher, talks about an emotive sense, perception, the mode of causal efficacy, that we very vaguely can perceive others' emotions or the values within things. But that's a matter of, all of this is totally up for debate. We have as well emotions. A lot of philosophers like Schopenhauer, Nietzsche say the will is the primary emotion, the desire. For Schopenhauer it's the desire to live, for Nietzsche it's the will to power, the desire for advancement in whatever way. Plus of course the traditional emotions such as happiness, sadness, melancholy, curiosity, so on and so forth, anxiety, fear, aesthetic, senses, that we can sense that something's beautiful or sublime perhaps, and so on. Then we have a whole another aspect of mind, concepts, so simple concepts like the thought of what you did yesterday, the thought of a triangle, the thought of a dog, a car, whatever. We have the power of reason, the power to calculate things, to plan things, and so on. All of these types of mind, or elements of mind, can be set in what I call modes of sentience. So there's something called access consciousness, which is strict awareness of something. So when you're very focused on something, you have a high degree of access consciousness that then lowers down into phenomenal sentience, or ultimately the subconscious, which is a notion that Leibniz wrote about already in the 18th century. We have what Bergson, the French philosopher Bergson, calls rhythms of duration. So the speed at which we experience the world can be fast or slow, probably, but it's, again, how do you prove this? We'll talk about proof later. Different animals perceive the world at different speeds of time, as it were. Even a human can perceive time at different speeds. Also, the length of the present, the here and now, that can be extended or decreased. And then, of course, we have something called veridicality, which means certain of our mental states are of the real world, as it were. Dangerous word, real. But, for example, when I see you in here, I think it's real. So it's a veridical perception, but of course we also have dreams. We can imagine. These are known as non-veridical perceptions. Even memories, imaginations, and whatnot. But that gets very hazy because, you know, the world we actually see is not really as it is, and there's something else we can speak about later. In other words, we represent the world in a particular human way. And what I've spoken about there mostly is just human mind or mentality. Of course, there are other forms of mind in different animals, presumably, and humans can even have mystical experiences, other forms of consciousness, which are, as William James said, ineffable. In other words, they're so odd that we cannot put them into words. They're noetic, they have a sense of reality, transient, don't last long, and passive, you're sort of not in control of it. Bertrand Russell wrote about unitive states. You can feel everything as one. Timeless states. Otto talks about meeting God, the fear of God, and so on. The question with these states is, I mean, my personal belief is that we all, I accept that these states of mind exist. In fact, I've experienced some of them myself by various methods. But the question is whether they are veridical, if they tell you something about reality, or if they're completely hallucinatory. Anyway, so that's a basic view of sentience. Even more basic was Descartes' theory of what the mind was. And Descartes, I should say, had a huge influence upon not only the philosophy of mind, but philosophy generally, and in fact upon religion, Christianity, and upon science, as we shall see. René Descartes, if you haven't heard of him, famously said, you know, I think that for I am, French mathematician, founder of modern philosophy, founder of modern mathematics, people say. Anyway, so this was his view, his distinction of the mind from matter. He writes, I am only a thinking and unextended thing. By unextended, he means non-spatial. Extension means space, width, length, breadth, depth. And I possess a distinct idea of body, matter, inasmuch as it is only an extended, spatial, and unthinking thing. So, really, Descartes got this from Galileo. But Galileo didn't have as much an effect on philosophy, but he did on science, of course. But the basic distinction here is that sentience, mentality, is not spatial. It has no length, breadth, depth. Whereas matter, the defining criterion of matter is that it is spatial. But you might be thinking, wait a minute, no, surely thoughts do have extension, don't they? Because they're, we can scan the brain and we can see the depth and sort of spatiality of neural activity and whatnot. Well, we can certainly say that the brain is correlated to the mind, But the nature of that correlation is one of the biggest questions we face in philosophy of mind, as we shall see. Now, Descartes then was a dualist, and he argued that the mind, defined in this way, was completely distinct from the body. So I'm going to give you a few different varieties now of the mind-matter relationship, which we call ontologies, theories of existence. Descartes then, Plato before him even, believed that mind was a separate matter, which meant that at death the soul would survive, go to heaven. He dedicated his meditations to the Pope, really. So this was a very Christian-friendly ontology. The problem with dualism, and now everything has got problems, by the way. I should say this, I don't know the answer, right? Okay, I just know problems with a lot of things. A lot of people think they know the answer, but no one agrees upon that. So I'm agnostic in this sense, really. Though I do lean towards it, as we shall see. Anyway, one of the many problems with dualism is interaction. How does something which then is not extended, not spatial, the mind, which is not tangible, not physical, how does that move the body? So, for example, when I desire something, for Descartes, desire must be unextended, must be non-physical. How can that possibly have an effect upon a separate substance, matter? Well, he said, Descartes himself said, well, it happens in the pineal gland. It's a little thing in the middle of the brain, centre of the brain. But even in his lifetime, that was criticised by, famously, Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia. So that just postpones the question. I mean, how does an unextended substance affect a physical substance, even in the pineal gland? Descartes didn't really have an answer to that. Also, Descartes is quite interesting because he said, only humans have sentience, so animals were not sentient at all, except magpies. He did say once that magpies have feelings, and then I think he realised that that didn't quite cohere with the rest of his philosophy. But just shows that there's something wrong there. There's another form of dualism from Henri Bergson's quite interesting. It's the notion that the brain is a receiver of the mind. So you would get perfect correlation in brain imaging